Hey everybody, I'm Finn McKenty. I'm the head of the music and audio channel here at CreativeLive. If you're new to CreativeLive, we are the world's leading online classroom for creative professionals. If you're watching this, you probably make music. We've got classes on everything from songwriting to engineering, mixing, mastering, and music business. If you want to check out more of that, head over to creativelive.com/audio and take a look. There's lots of free previews for just about all our classes there. So if you're interested in any of the above, then please go poke around. This is our new series called Q&A, which is your chance to talk live with your favorite artists, producers, and industry people. Our guest for today is Mr. Graham Cochrane of the Recording Revolution. Graham, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hey, I'm honored to be here, man.
What are you working on this week?
This week, I'm actually recording an entire song with a $300 recording studio.
Cool. What'd you get for $300?
I got an interface, so I got like a PreSonus audio box interface. It gives me a condenser microphone, so I got like a Samsung $79 condenser microphone, mic stand, mic cable, filter, and we're using GarageBand since that's free, and all that's just under $300 US. So we recorded drums yesterday. So
cool.
Awesome.
So is this like a specific thing you set out? You said, I'm going to record something with a $300 budget?
Yeah, because I'm crazy, and because I champion home studio recording with the idea that it's not expensive equipment that we need to get good recordings. We've talked about this on the podcast,
yeah.
But so I'm always talking about that, and there's always people that disagree with me, which is fine. And somebody said something related to one of the posts I did recently that it wasn't possible to get a really good sounding recording with a $300 studio. And so I'm kind of snarky in that I want to prove people that it is possible. Mostly because there's people out there that need to hear this, that it will encourage and motivate. And whether they use a $300 studio or a $1,000 studio, it doesn't matter. But they'll see, oh, if he can do that, then it's clearly not the gear that's holding me back. And then they'll be excited to go make music. Cool.
Well, how much longer do you think it'll be before we can hear the results of this?
I'm doing it in stages. So the first video is going to come out tomorrow with drums. So I'm going to do drums. You'll see and hear what we did with one mic, and then we're going to do bass and guitars. I'm going to do vocals, and then I'm going to show you how I mixed it in GarageBand as well. So wish me luck. I'm trying to make it sound awesome.
Nice. Well, drums are definitely the part that it'd be the biggest question mark for me. So I'll make sure to check that out. I guess the first one from Ken B6870. Hi Graham, I really enjoyed your class here at CreativeLive. How did you discover all the tricks and things you shared with us?
Wow. Thanks for watching the class. Okay, so everything I've learned is because I was taught it by somebody who's smarter than me. Some things I've discovered on my own, but I don't claim very many discoveries. So I just played around with multi-track recording in high school because I wanted my band to sound awesome. So, you fiddle with an 8-track machine and you start to realize, okay, I can record on the different tracks, and you just fiddle around and it doesn't sound good. I bought some software. I think I had like Cakewalk Guitar Tracks Pro back in the day. And that blew my mind, but I made so many bad recordings. I put like chorus and reverb on everything. And
well, they're free. You might as well.
It was an exploratory time. So you learn a lot of stuff that way, but I decided I wanted to go to school for this because I really loved it. And my parents said I had to go to school and learn in college, and I was grateful for the education, but I didn't want to take any other major, so I did audio recording, had some great professors there, learned a lot, and then I just thought I knew how to do everything early on, so I just set up shop and became a freelance recording mixing engineer in my dorm room, starting there, and just started recording people. And I think I had a little bit of naivety. I didn't realize how bad I was, but people actually paid me to record and mix, and that was the best learning experience ever. I learned how to get better recordings, how to get better mixes. And I'm always listening to good tracks, and why does my stuff not sound like that? And so it was a combination of just trial and error, school. I interned at a really nice studio, got some really cool mentors, made a lot of mistakes. And I'm looking on YouTube. I'm learning new stuff all the time. I learned something last week. I saw a really cool mic placement technique that I was trying around and messing around in the studio, and it's super cool. So I'm learning all the time.
Well, fortunately, that was a long time ago. The statute of limitations has probably expired, so I don't think they can come after you for a refund.
I don't think so. I think the PayPal 60 days was up.
There you
So.
go. So this is a really, really great question. I love this because it's a very honest question, and I am actually the same as this person, which is I have an embarrassing problem. I know that I should use mix bus compression. I know people use compression to glue their drum buses together, but the embarrassing part is I rarely hear the difference. Such subtle compression just baffles me. I still do it because I'm told that I should, but I feel stupid throwing plugins on a track when I don't really hear the difference. And I do this all the time too. I go, well, so-and-so says that slow attack time is better for this thing, so I guess I should use a slow attack time, but I can't necessarily hear it. So what are your thoughts both on specifically on the topic of subtle compression, but in general kind of that idea of doing stuff because you feel like you're supposed to, even if you can't really hear it?
That's a great question. That's an honest question. If you can't hear the difference and you don't know why you're doing it, then don't do it. Even if I tell you to do it, don't do it. For the longest time, a good example for me, the longest time people kept saying you got to use multi-band compression. It's the secret. It's not just a compressor, it's a multi-band compressor. And I started to think that has to be the magic bullet that I'm missing. Of course my mixes don't sound good because I'm not using multi-band compression.
It has multi-bands. It must be better.
Bands. One band is good, 4 bands, it's got to be better. Man, gotta love the internet because that didn't help me at all, because what happens when you put something like multi-band compression on your mix and you click a preset that says like pop master, and you click and you're like, oh, this sounds super hyped and I guess it sounds different, and it just jacks up your mix because Graham, who's wielding the tool, didn't know how to use it. And I decided early on, like, I'm scared to death of multi-band compression. I don't understand it, so I'm not going to use it. And for years I did not use it, and guess what? I was fine. I still made a living doing recording and mixing. I've only recently started using multiband. I'm only using multiband as an example of something I didn't understand. I've only recently been using it as I've been learning more and more as different people have been teaching me, like, hey, this is how I'm using it, and I see what they're doing, I try it, and I go, oh, I see how they're using it. So the answer to the question with mix bus compression, you're not supposed to use it. There's no rule. In fact, in some regards, you could say if you can get away with putting nothing on your mix bus or hardly any plugins on any of your tracks, period, the better, the less chance of you screwing it up. So only put on what you know is going to help, and only use plugins when you know why you're using it. When in doubt, leave it off, and then as you learn and you get more comfortable, and as your ear progresses, you might be able to hear the difference. Like, I only do mix bus compression because I like what I'm getting when I put it on. I wouldn't do it if I didn't hear a difference. And I'm the first to admit that I can't hear a difference on certain things, and it's okay.
Love the answer, love the question. Another good one here, something that I have struggled with as well. Hi Graham, I have a problem that isn't really audio related, which is that I can't seem to finish songs. I'm very good at starting them, and I have probably 30 projects that sound good, but I just don't ever finish them. It sounds dumb, but it's really hard. I'm not really bored with them. I think it just might be hard for me to call them done.
Oof, I feel you. The magic of the deadline is really important. So like last year, I did a series on the site. I did it at the beginning of January, where I basically used a deadline for myself, and then I announced it to the world, aka you all, saying, hey, I'm going to write and record and release a 5 to 6 song EP by, at the time it was March 31st last year. And by announcing it to everybody, I basically had to deliver, because otherwise I would feel really embarrassed or like I didn't measure up. And that was really helpful for me to say, okay, if I'm going to release something on this date, then I work backwards. And then it has to be mastered by this date. And it has to have artwork completed by this date. To have it mastered, that means I have to have the mixes done by this date. And I tracked it all the way back to how much time do I have to write these songs. So that was from starting from scratch. But for me, the deadline is the secret. And if you've got a bunch of projects and you don't know which to pick, then you need to bring in a couple of trusted friends, maybe a spouse or a family member who's not really a musician, but who you can just listen to something like an average person and go, I don't like this or I do like this, because that's really valuable. Then maybe you can table the ones that he or she doesn't like as much. And then maybe a trusted musician friend or two to say, hey, I really want to finish one of these projects. Listen to these 3 or 4 or 5 songs. Can you tell me what's my best stuff? And just take with a lot of courage what they say, so that you know, hey, I'm just going to focus on what everybody said was my best stuff, put a deadline on it, and don't do a massive thing. Like complete one song or complete a 3-song EP. Get a small win and prove to yourself that, wow, I was able to do this in 2 months or 3 months. And then you get addicted to finishing stuff. And it feels good because you know what? To get better at recording and mixing, you have to finish a project. It won't be your best project, but as soon as you finish it and you go, yeah, I could have done this stuff better, you take that with you to the next project. And that's the only way I've been able to get better, is to seal something and say it's done, even though I know it could be better. It's done because the deadline says it's done, and then I move on.
I love that idea of small wins, base hits, not home runs. I love that idea. So here's getting a little bit more into the nuts and bolts. Here's a good one. Again, a common thing that I think we all struggle with. Let's say you've got a kick-ass chorus with rhythm guitar, lead guitar, synth, bass, drums, harmonies, etc. Everything sounds great, but you feel like you have too much stuff in there. The problem is, if you remove anything, it feels like everything is falling apart. How do you solve this problem?
It sounds like an arrangement problem. Good mixing is good arranging. Good recording is good arranging. So I usually, when stuff sounds crowded and a mess like that, I start muting tracks one at a time and seeing if it helps. So like, I'll mute that synth. Does it help or hurt? If it hurts a little bit, but it helps in a lot of ways, like, wow, now the drums are really coming together, that's very useful information, because then you might say, the synth was covering up a lot of the drums, but when I get rid of it completely, it is missing something. So maybe I can just do some really aggressive like filtering and just sort of have it live only at a certain frequency level where it does what it needs to do, but it's letting everything else breathe. So my biggest suggestion, and we talked about this a little bit on the EQ masterclass, was mix in mono for a long time. So take your mix and put something on your mix bus, or if your interface has a mono button or your monitor control has something that will take the stereo mix and collapse it to mono, and then listen to those tracks. If they sounded crowded in stereo, I guarantee they're going to sound even harder to listen to in mono. But use that and then mute stuff and then EQ stuff to see if you're getting some clarity and some space. So it's either an EQ issue, or there's just too many tracks, or tracks that are just not, they're kind of redundant. They don't do anything helpful to the track.
Well, speaking of stereo, I personally have found that panning can be a really good tool in situations like that, where you got so much stuff, you don't want to get rid of it, so you got to find a place for it, whether that's filtering or panning. I feel like those two things usually are really helpful. Just make it fit somewhere.
Great point. And Finn, related to that is, maybe some of the issue is stereo tracks. If you have too many stereo tracks, I talk about this a lot because this is a problem. You can crowd your mix because everything is kind of in stereo. A stereo synth, a stereo drums, a stereo guitars, stereo whatever. You need to collapse a lot of those tracks down to mono, and then, like you're saying, Finn, pan them somewhere, and that will really open up your mix. I think Dave Pensado calls it big mono.
Yeah.
When you have lots of stereo tracks, it's like one big mono. So like you actually don't hear stereo when everything is in stereo. So that could be part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Question on guitars. I would like to know your thoughts on recording electric guitar direct and using amp sims. Should I use a DI box or a preamp, and what levels should the audio have going into the plugin?
Yeah, great question. The last 2 albums I did for my own music, I used amp sims exclusively. So I did a record where I used an 11 rack from Avid, which is an awesome box. It's an actual external unit. And then on my recent record, I was doing a crazy challenge where I did everything inside of Reason, and I just used the Line 6 guitar amp modeling, the pod modeling thing in it, and I just plugged right into my interface. I had a little $200 interface I was doing this on, because again, I'm weird. I do these weird challenges. So that was just the guitar right into an interface using the instrument input, which is like a high Z input, which would be like a DI. So yeah, use a DI, or if you have an interface, plug it in with a 1/4-inch cable and make sure you switched your interface over to the instrument level. And then as far as gain goes, you're looking at 2 things with direct guitar. You're looking at the actual gain of the actual guitar signal, and then that needs to be somewhat conservative, because then The plug-in or the amp sim is going to obviously add gain because it's amplifying it, adding the overdrive, adding the amp sim. You want to see what that level is too. So now you're really dealing with two gain stages, and it's just depending on what plug-in you use, it's a combination of either adjusting the physical gain going into the preamp or the interface or the DI, and then balancing that with the output of the amp. Because you could always have a low level going into your DAW, but if the output on the amp sim is super high and clipping, you just got to turn that down because that's the amp level, and you can save yourself there. So just play with those two levels.
Cool. This is a good question from someone whose username I can't pronounce, but hi Graham, I haven't started watching any videos yet because I'm starting as a beginner. My current computer is an Acer Aspire, which is too slow for Pro Tools. I want to purchase a MacBook Pro 15-inch for ease of use. Do you think this is a good way to go or not? Michael from Indiana. So he's got this PC. Do you think that he needs to buy a MacBook in order to get started?
You don't need to buy a MacBook to get started, meaning there's other computers you can use. So you don't have to have an Apple or a MacBook Pro even, which is the higher end version. I don't know the processor on your Acer, but Avid's site is very, very clear when you look at the system requirements. So you can literally, maybe you've already done this, is you can look at what the bare minimum is for your version of Pro Tools in terms of processor and RAM and operating system. And if your computer matches that, then you can probably get started on it with a simple, few track count project. You might run into problems when you have a ton of plugins. But if you're saying you've already looked at it and it just won't run Pro Tools at all, I'm a huge fan of Apple computers. I've used them for years because they work out of the box. They're super fast. They're super quiet. Not a whole lot of fan noise usually. And you can get really good deals on them. So for example, I buy all my Macs refurb. So I go to the Apple store and buy the refurbished ones. They keep hiding that little tag. They don't seem to want you to find the refurb. They move it around. But there's a tag somewhere that says refurbished products, and you can buy last year's model basically that they can't sell anymore, or someone sent back and they repaired. And you get the same 1-year warranty that you would on a new one, and it's usually a few $100 cheaper. Or get on eBay, because the secondary market for Apple computers is phenomenal because these computers last forever. I bought a used MacBook. It was a PowerBook back in the day. I bought it. It was 4 or 5 years old when I bought it 7 years ago off of eBay, put in a new battery, and we've been using it for 7 years to record our church services. So it's an 11-year-old laptop. It's still running strong. You can't update the operating system anymore, but it records great. So they're beasts of a computer, and you don't have to have the top-level MacBook. I use a MacBook Air for mobile recording. I think I got it for like $800 refurb.
Great advice. So you don't need the top of the line. Just need something that will get the job done.
Yes.
Question from France, which is a really good one. Thank you for doing this Q&A. My question is, how do you choose the right reference track?
I get that question a lot. I have some really smart friends. A guy named Mike Senior who writes for Sound on Sound magazine. Guys like Ian Shepherd, who's a mastering engineer in the UK, who have really good technical answers to this question about the right type of track to use as a reference track. And my answer is very, very simple. I don't have that good technical answer because all I do for reference tracks is I pick a song that I know was professionally done. So usually it's an A-list talent, a band that I'm very familiar with, whose song really closely fits the instrumentation and vibe of the song I'm working on. So if it's very folky and it's got a banjo and it's very acoustic, I'm going to look for a band and a song, even on an album in particular, that has that same instrumentation and pull that in. That's all I'm looking for because I know it's a good track because I've listened to it in my car and it sounds great. It sounds great on the radio, their music video, it sounds great. So I know it was well done. And then I know that they use the similar instrumentation. They have a drum kit played with brushes and they have a banjo and an acoustic versus I'm doing a heavy rock song. I want a song with aggressive guitars that really produce hyped kick drum sound and snare drum sound. I just find something that sounds like what I'm shooting for, that I know sounds good, and that's all I do for reference tracks. I bring it in, and it tells me what I'm shooting for sonically, ballpark-wise.
So along the same lines, speaking of reference, this is again something I think we've all struggled with from Max Daniels. Hey Graham, thank you so much for doing this. Is it possible to narrow down what makes professional mixes, quote unquote, sound so tight and crisp? I think my amateur mixes are well balanced, well reverbed, well panned, but they sound like, quote unquote, I did it on my computer. Is there anything that you can tell me that will take me the rest away and give me that last 10%? So this is something I still struggle with all the time. How do you make it, sound professional? What are those little, what's that missing 10%?
That's the question everybody's trying to ask, and everybody wants the answer to that question to be a piece of gear. I'm telling you, they do. Even though people don't want to spend money, they want that answer to be a plug-in or a piece of gear, because then they can go buy it.
Right.
Even if it means I need to save up for 3 years, at least I can go buy it and then problem solve. That's not the solution. It's a combination of some of the songs that you like are some of the best musicians in the world. The songs I like have musicians that are better than me. They're more talented than me. They may have played on instruments that were in better shape than mine. They may have just put a much better performance. Maybe I was really rushed when I recorded that day, and they were really relaxed and they had all the time in the world. I don't know. It's the performance. It's the performer. Maybe it's a better song. I know this doesn't sound like your mixing question, but if it's a really well-written song, they mix themselves because everything about it fits into place. So there's those intangibles that you can't fix in the mixing stage. You can't change your talent level, your performance, the song, the arrangement, really. As far as mixing goes, I find that I'm getting that 10% gap is narrowing every year as I just become a better listener and I'm making smarter EQ and compression decisions. I feel like so much of the mix is EQ and compression, and you can have a decent mix, but when you get that so well, that's what we did at EQ and Compression Masterclass, because it's what everyone's talking about and it's what everybody needs to know. That once you continue to get better at that, because you always do, you get closer. And then what I call sweetening, which is that like you've got a good mix and you're feeling like this, you could press play and it's pretty good, but when you listen to your favorite records, pick a song, any song, every moment of that song is powerful and engaging, whether it's a slow song or a hyped song, from start to finish. And the producers spend a lot of time making sure the intro isn't too long or too boring or too repetitive, or verse 2 is more interesting than verse 1, or the chorus changes slightly, whether it's instrumentation or vibe. And think through your song at the end of a mix like that, start to finish, and listen through as an average listener. Is there anything in this song that would make me change the radio station because it's kind of boring? If so, something needs to pop here. And for me, that's part of getting your mix to closer to the end there.
I will give you my 2 cents on this for the 0 people who asked.
It's your show, man. It's your deal.
Well, one of the cool parts about this job is that I get the chance to look under the hood and open up sessions from some of the people that I really look up to as musicians, engineers, whatever. And there's nothing in there that's like magic. It's exactly what you said. They use the same EQ and compression plugins that you and I have or can buy, and they're usually really small moves on them. I'm like, oh, what do those guitars look like? They show me the EQ, plus 1 dB here, minus 2 dB there, that's it. The one thing I would say that is different in their mixes versus the ones I was doing years ago or seen others is they do a lot more detailed automation work. Because oftentimes you'll go, I like the kick drum here, but I don't like it there. And some of those, especially on like metal stuff, there might be thousands of automation moves in a mix, and I know that's true of pop as well. So, but again, that's not magic. It's just the detailed work of, like you said, listening to every piece of the song, and going, is this right? And if not, if you think the kick drum is too loud, just go into the automation, turn it down. There's no magic. It's just putting in the work of making sure all those little details are where you want them to be.
That's a great point. I mean, think about a movie. What separates like amateur films from the films we see in Hollywood? Let's just take script aside. Let's say the stories were equally good, and let's say the acting was equally good, and let's say the cameras were equally good, and all that stuff, and lighting, and all the stuff that makes it good. The big budget movies, they spend a lot of time in editing. It's cutting the scenes at the right point. Enhancing every shot so that your eye is brought to exactly what the director wants you to focus on in that moment, so that there's no, hopefully, wasted shot Whereas an amateur film, they may not spend that much time cutting every single scene perfectly because it just takes a lot of time. But that's what big budgets afford, time, and time is really precious. But a lot of good mixes took a lot of, not much time to get it pretty solid, maybe to where you and I have it, but it's that extra little bit of time maybe to finesse, and like you're saying, Finn, lots of little perfect automation moves that keep things perfect from start to finish.
Yep. So question about monitoring. I know how important it is to have a second speaker to make sure that your mixes sound great anywhere, but I have trouble understanding how often you should switch the monitoring to reference it with another pair of speakers and what you should listen to. Let me know if something isn't clear enough. So basically, what's your strategy for, using multiple sets of monitoring for reference?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most of my time is spent on my main set of monitors. So that's where I'm doing the bulk of my mix. What I do with my second set, it's actually only one. It's one mono speaker, and it's really crappy sounding. It's just very mid-rangey. Once I get my mix, because I know my room, I've got my speakers set where I want them, and I kind of have created this mix position where when I sit down, it's the best spot for my face to be in this room to hear the mix. When I've done all the hard work, I lose perspective quickly. So I gain perspective by pulling in a reference track, like we mentioned earlier, go, oh, wow, those drums sound different than my drums, and why is that? Is that good or bad? But then, two, I'll flip at that point, maybe 80% of the way into the mix, I flip over to my other speaker because it sounds very different frequency response, and that wakes up my ears. And what I listen for then is, okay, I've got a decent mix on my main speakers. Are there any frequencies that are jumping out as really annoying or harsh? Because this set exaggerates the mid-range. And so then I go, oh, interesting. It gives me a new read on my mix. I go back, I try to tweak it a little bit, and then I go back to my main speaker. So I maybe only check them once, and then I check them maybe at the very end one last time on a final listen through, because I'll listen through the whole song, loud, quiet, on the other set of speakers, by my door, whatever. So I don't really reference and flip back and forth that often. It's just to wake up my ears and get a second opinion.
And you get to know your main monitors too. Like, the ones I have, I know are a little, they've got a little boost in the 1 to 2K range. So I know that I probably want to be a little bit more conservative there. I know my car goes crazy on the sub bass. So, you get to know them, and then you don't have to do quite as much guesswork.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we have time for one last question. I really like the last part of this. I want to mix my own acoustic guitar / vocal EP. What are your tips for, one, mixing your own voice, and two, blending the guitar and vocal so the vocal doesn't sound pasted on? So I really liked that term pasted on, because I think that's something that you struggle with. Like, how do you get the vocal to sound full and present without it sounding like you just copied and pasted it in there?
Right, so it's a guitar and vocal recording?
Acoustic guitar and vocal, yeah.
Played live, or was he just asking in general about mixing it after it was recorded?
Oh, well, let's. It says I want to mix my own acoustic guitar / vocal EP, so let's assume it's, a singer-songwriter kind of thing.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, vocals, I feel like with acoustic and one vocal, it should be, I don't mean this as any disrespect, it should be pretty simple operation because there's not much else fighting for the space. So you're going to take your acoustic guitar and make sure that it fills the space and the role that you want it to fill. And then your vocal, the key for me is to keep the compression in the optimal spot, because a vocal in real life is all over the place. It's loud and it's quiet. It's certain vowels are louder. If I open my mouth for an ah or an o sound, I'm going to get a louder signal than with an oo sound. And that the microphone is just going to pick up that exaggeration. So a compressor that's doing, 2, 3 dB, 6 dB of gain reduction, only when you sing the louder parts, it's turning those down. And then you can have some makeup gain that brings the now squashed, I hate that word, but smaller dynamic range performance back up to the level you like. Now what you have is a vocal that sounds like what we hear in real life, because our ears don't really pay attention as much to the dynamics. They just hear someone singing. And that's what's going to give you that consistent vocal performance, which shouldn't sound pasted on. It should sound nice and up front. Now, it could be an EQ issue as well. You want to make sure that the vocal and the acoustic guitar's frequencies aren't overlapping too much, where there's just space for everything. But that should be able to be taken care of. And then again, reference a good acoustic guitar and vocal professional track that you like, and as you're doing your EQ and compression, flip over to that track and notice, what is it I like about that? Does it sound like he's really more in front of the guitar or more behind? Is it that mine's too loud? I think our ears are really bad with memory, and we forget how loud a vocal should sit in a mix in a similar genre. So reference, always reference, because it tells you, gives you clues, gives you pointers, and then maybe it's that your vocal's just too loud or too quiet.
Cool. Well, we will wrap there. Thank you so much, Graham, for joining us. Thank you to everybody who hopped in the chat room and asked a question. Really excited to get a chance to throw these at you live. You weathered the storm. Congratulations.
Yes, good questions. You guys made my day and my job easy. Good question.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you soon.